Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today for the HAWS All You Need to Know About ANSI Z358.1 web seminar. I want to give you a little bit of background on HAWS real quick if you're not familiar with who we are. In 1906, we invented the drinking fountain. So since in the last 110 years, we've been manufacturing drinking fountains. And then in the 1950s, we got into the emergency equipment sector. A little bit of background on the webinar itself. If you do have any questions, feel free to post them in the questions section on your control panel at any time during the presentation. We do tend to get a lot of questions on these webinars, so if we are unable to get to your question, we'll make sure to create a Q&A document with all of those unanswered questions, and we'll send that out within a week after this webinar. So we'll make sure to get those answered for you. This is being recorded currently, and will be available on demand and will be sent out to you in the follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours after the presentation. Throughout this presentation, we're going to launch approximately 4 or 5 poll questions, so your participation would be extremely appreciated. And with me today is Brian Clark. He is our Director of Sales in North America.
Good morning and good afternoon.
And my name is Samantha Hoke, and I'm the Marketing Specialist here at HAWS. So today's topics, we're going to start out with what is the ANSI ISEA Z358.1 Standard. Then we're going to move into some of the more recent revisions that were added and changed in 2014. We'll go over the significant requirements that are most important for you to comply with your equipment already installed or equipment that you will be installing. We'll move into why tepid water is important. And we will end with some best practices for emergency equipment based on what we typically see out in the field, some of those who are going above and beyond and how you can do the same. And we'll end it with a Q&A session with the questions that you guys send in. As with all presentations, we should start with the why. So why is it important to comply with the ANSI standard? The safety shower and emergency eye wash is your first line of defense after an incident. So if a unit doesn't work or function properly in one manner or another, whether it's flow, pressure, tepid water, etc., then you could potentially increase an injury as well as the time of the victim spending in the hospital, which will end up resulting in lost time and money. Of course, we want to avoid injury, fatality, lost time and money, and prevent workplace risk. Recently, OSHA has stepped up enforcement specifically around emergency showers and eye washes, and for those employers who have a history of a serious or repeat violation. Another reason why it's important, in August 1st of last year, OSHA increased their fines by 80%. So since 1990, they have not increased their fines. 80% is extremely significant. So a past violation prior to August 1st in 2016 could have been around $70,000 and is now increased up to $126,000. That's huge, so might as well take the steps ahead of time to prevent any potential OSHA fines. OSHA published publicly that they audited over 39,000 organizations within a year, and 17,000 of those were labeled as unexpected visits. Here's a couple examples of recent OSHA fines specific to emergency eye washes and showers. A marine terminal operator in December of 2016 had a repeat violation, and again, those typically will see some higher fines or more hefty fines for not providing eye washes at all when transporting ethanol from rail cars to tanker trucks. We saw the total penalty of $108,000 for that missing eye wash or eye washes. A food manufacturer in August, which is right after the increase of the fines went into play, they did not provide suitable facilities for drenching when working with bleach and other caustic chemicals. That penalty just for the eye wash alone, the missing eye wash alone, or the equipment, drench equipment, was approximately $10,000. A metal finishing company, again in August after the increase, it was a repeat violation. They did have emergency eye washes and showers, but OSHA will come in and inspect those pieces of equipment to the most recent ANSI standard, and they were non-functioning. That could mean a lot of different things. Again, the flow could be too low, could be too high, there could have been non-tepid water, a lot of different potential instances, and that total penalty was around $11,000. So let's get into what the ANSI ISEA Z358.1 standard is. This is a standard that's recognized and approved by ISEA, the International Safety Equipment Association, and they sponsor the development of the ANSI standard. The ANSI standard Z358.1 specifically defines emergency eye washes and shower design, location, temperature requirements for proper functionality, and usage. This standard was first published in 1981. Interestingly enough, Hawes has manufactured emergency eye washes and showers 30 years prior to that first revision. So initially there wasn't any standard to dictate how they were installed, maintained, or their functionality. There were revisions in 1990, 1998, 2004, 2009, and the most recent in 2014. There were some significant changes in 2009 that really affected the industry positively. One was the temperature range for water delivery. That was not previously defined as it is now. Simultaneous use, the verbiage was tightened up a little bit, so we want to ensure that both if you have a combination shower, an eye wash or eye face wash, and the shower head are able to work simultaneously at the right flow rates and pressures. And then the verbiage was also strengthened around eye wash testing requirements. So we'll go into more detail on each of these in the coming slides. So as mentioned, they introduced the most recent revision of the standard it was actually published in January of 2015, but it is titled the 2014 revision. Most of these changes were focused on the design aspect of the equipment, which is important more for us as a manufacturer, but definitely important for you as the purchaser and installer to be aware of. The 2016 revisions included design, manufacture, and installation changes for emergency showers, where the equipment installation needs to be located, and then adjusted measurements for heights of installation and then the water flow. As mentioned earlier, we'll definitely get into more detail on these specific changes. With that, we're going to launch our first poll. So if you could take a moment, we'd like to know what best describes your role in choosing showers and eye face washes. Oh, sorry, we're just getting it up on the screen now. We'd like to know, do you decide or make a recommendation? Do you install and or maintain the product? Do you place the order? Specify product in plans? Or I don't have a role? And with these polls, we're going to give around 30 to 45 seconds for everybody to partake. So thank you for that. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your participation in that poll. So let's get into the significant requirements of the standard. Z358.1 specifically is about a 50-page document. So we're going to focus on the significant requirements that pertain to you. All emergency eye washes, eye face washes, showers, and combination units must be identified with highly visible signage. So most manufacturers of emergency eye washes and showers provide that with the equipment, but we want to ensure that it is installed properly, it is highly visible, the colors are recognized. We'll get into color requirements a little later on, and just make sure that that's a part of the training for your employees so they know where to go if an incident were to occur. All equipment also needs to go from off to on in 1 second or less. This is mostly on the design side as well, but it's important that you're aware of it. There is, interestingly enough, a misconception out in the industry that the equipment or the valving needs to go from off to on in one motion. We hear that a lot when we're at trade shows and through these webinars, and we're here to tell you that we've looked back at all the revisions of the ANSI Z358.1 standard, and not once has it mentioned one motion activation. So specific to products like a faucet-mounted eye wash, where it would require you to turn on your water source and then either twist, activate, or turn on the eye wash. That is a two motion, but that is approved by the ANSI standard as long as it's in 1 second or less. So keep an eye out for that. All equipment needs to deliver flushing fluid for a full 15 minutes. That's a lot of water. So one thing to consider that's not touched on in the standard is drainage, the drainage aspect. So for example, with a combination shower and eye face wash unit running for a full 15 minutes at approximately, that would be 23 gallons per minute, there needs to be somewhere for the water to go. So keep that in mind when you're purchasing or installing new emergency equipment.
And Samantha, on that note, we do see a lot of those in the field, specifically in hospitals where they'll have issues testing because they can't flood out the floors beneath them.
Yeah, definitely. So keep that in mind. Huge aspect of that. And we'll get into the testing, the weekly and annual testing requirements. So to think that that has to be activated each week, that is water that needs to drain somewhere. So all equipment, again, all eye washes, eye face washes, showers, and combination units need to be accessible within 10 seconds. One of the most difficult parts of the standard with installation is the location aspect. It makes it hard for us as the manufacturer to recommend how many and where these pieces of equipment need to be installed because we don't know the potential hazards at your facilities. So the 10-second rule tends to fall on the owner or the installer. I'd recommend utilizing your health and safety manager or team to evaluate the workplace so you can determine quantity and location, installation locations. The equipment needs to be located on the same level as the hazard. So if you have an employee that's on the second floor, the unit needs to be on the second floor if the hazard is there as well. It needs to be where the worker is at. No stairs, no flights, no elevation differences. All the equipment also needs to be free of obstruction. Obstruction is a pretty broad term, but we'll get into some more detail. So no hoses, no cords, again, no stairs. So this is going to mitigate potential additional hazards, no tripping on the way to the equipment. Again, keep in mind, people may not have the best line of sight when something may have gotten in their eyes or on their body. So it's important for that path to be clear. All equipment needs to provide a controlled flow of flushing fluid at a velocity low enough to be non-injurious to the user. So an emergency shower, for example, is providing 20 gallons per minute at 30 psi. Just to put this into perspective, this is approximately 10 times the flow rate of a home shower. So the pressure is harder than you would expect, but the intent is to get the chemicals off of your body. It's important to provide for eye washes a soft, even flow to promote the use of the equipment for the full 15-minute flush. That's on the manufacturer as well as the installer to make sure we installed it at the correct PSI. It's being checked on a weekly basis to ensure that if an incident occurs, we do have that proper flow with flow rates, flow controls and a nice uniform flush. So we're going to go through the different types of equipment that are specified in the standard, and those are eye washes, eye face washes, and drench showers. Oftentimes, eye washes and eye face washes, those terms tend to be used interchangeably, but they are absolutely different and they provide different coverage. So for some of you it may be intuitive, others it may not if you haven't worked with equipment like this. So an eye wash essentially covers and flushes the eyes. An eye face wash has more coverage, will cover the eyes as well as the face. A question that we get often is how much of the face needs to be covered. That is not identified in the standard, so when you are deciding on an eye face wash, definitely look into the flow patterns and seeing how much of the face it covers. The more, the better. So all of these are required a minimum of 30 psi. In the standard, there isn't a max, so anything over 90 psi could blow out any flow controls that may be in the heads of the equipment and the head of the eye washer and the head of the drench shower, so keep that in mind. The standard itself does not have a lot of maximums, really, outside of a couple installation requirements and the tepid water requirement, but here you look and you can see that they're minimums for the gallons per minute. Always keep in mind comfort of the victim. So although an eye wash may require a minimum of 0.4 gallons per minute, you're not wanting to put 5 gallons per minute through an eye wash. So as you can see on the screen, eye washes eyewash flow requires a minimum of 0.4 gallons per minute. That's a relatively low flow, but there are all different types of eyewashes. There's gravity-fed, air pressurized, and plumbed. An eye face wash requires a minimum delivery of 3 gallons per minute. So that's significantly more than an eye wash, which makes sense though. It's got a lot more coverage on the eyes and the face. Drench shower is 20 gallons per minute. And a combination unit is any combination of an eye or eye face wash with a drench shower. So and that requires 20 gallons per minute along with whatever the gallons per minute is for the eye wash or the eye face wash. This is one of the most common non-compliance issues, and that's simultaneous flow. So as mentioned earlier, both the eye wash and the shower need to be flowing at the proper gallons per minute for the full 15 minutes. When we go out in the field, we'll see someone turn on the eye wash and then activate the shower head, and what happens there is starvation. There's starvation to the eye wash because the flow is being pulled in through the shower. So at the time of installation and the time of testing on a weekly basis, we need to ensure there is no starvation and the gallons per minute is being met. All right, we're going to go into poll question 2. Let's take a quick break. So we'd like to know, how likely are you to purchase or retrofit your showers and eye washes within the next 6 to 12 months? Very likely, moderately likely, slightly likely, or not at all likely. Great, thanks everybody for participating. Let's continue with some more significant requirements. Specifically for eye washes and eye face washes, the flushing fluid shall cover the areas between the interior and exterior of a gauge at some point less than 8 inches above the eye wash head. So as you can see in this video, we're placing the eye wash gauge into the eye wash streams and ensuring that those two eye wash streams hit the 2 circles on the gauge at any point less than 8 inches. That's going to ensure that you have the proper flow rate and the proper pattern. I'm going to switch to my sales side for a moment, and if anybody's interested, we get this question a lot, in purchasing an eye wash gauge for their weekly and annual testing. Model 9015 from Haws is available for you guys to purchase. All right, back to putting on my educational hat. All eye washes, eye face washes, combination eye face washes, and shower units need to deliver tepid flushing fluid. This one, as we mentioned, was a revision that was added in the 2009 standard. It was also in the standard prior to that, but there were no temperature parameters defined. So in 2009, they actually put a minimum and a maximum temperature range, which is 60 degrees Fahrenheit to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. A key piece to remember is that the equipment isn't considered compliant at the time of purchase, but rather at the installation and post-testing. So you can't receive your emergency shower and eye wash combination unit and say, I'm ANSI compliant. It needs to be installed. It needs to be tested to the full ANSI standard to ensure compliance. So we've done some studies, 75% of ophthalmologists say that having tempered water is extremely important, saying that it increases the chance of a victim to tolerate the full 15-minute flush. One thing to keep in mind throughout the rest of this presentation, put yourself in the shoes of the victim. Maybe you as the installer or whomever may not think you'd ever have to use this equipment, but if that were to occur, you would really want it to work properly. You'd want the water to flow, you'd want it to be clean, and you'd want the equipment to function as needed, definitely with a comfortable temperature range. Interesting enough, we question as a manufacturer that temperature range. 60 is fairly low, and put yourself in an instance in the middle of winter, outdoor, you may have an outdoor combination unit and an incident occurs. You run over there and the unit is delivering 60 degrees Fahrenheit and you have to stay in there for 15 minutes. That might not be bearable for particular people. So we recommend an 80 to an 85 degree temperature range at installation. Again, if it is at 60, you're going to meet the requirement, but take into consideration the user. So an old
We
naval.
have talked with, sorry to interrupt you, but we have talked with some plant managers where this has been an issue because you have the victim who goes into the shower, and if they cannot stay in there for the full 15 minutes, one, they're in more jeopardy, or two, you endanger others because they're having to hold them in for the full 15 minutes, and then they can be contaminated as well.
Yeah, that is a big piece. Thanks. So there was an old naval study that claimed that the human body can withstand 60-degree weather for 20 minutes without risking hypothermia. Of course, this study was most likely done on a particular body type and build that I wouldn't say necessarily relates to your typical employee. So that's where they got the lower end of the spectrum. As the changes and revisions occur in the standard, us as a manufacturer, at least from Haas's perspective, we are trying to tighten up that range to make it more realistic. Let's move into why tepid water is important. Ensuring that you have tepid water is going to encourage the removal of the contaminated clothing. Interestingly enough, the contaminated clothing actually acts as a barrier for that water to flush off the contaminants, and it could keep that chemical or contaminant against the skin. It encourages the full 15-minute drench, as Brian mentioned. If the water is too hot, over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, you could risk severe scalding and increase the chemical reaction. With hot water, as you may know, the pores are opened more and the chemicals could get into your pores. If the water is too cold, that's going to add the risk of severe hypothermia to the already occurring chemical exposure. A lot of people with tepid water think it's only needed for cold regions. So tempering for hot water in hot climates is often overlooked, but it's definitely a necessity in certain regions throughout the world. Let's move into some of the changes that we earlier went through in the last 2014 revision. This one specifically is really just a verbiage change. It was to help strengthen the importance of the hands-free operation to allow the victim to remove clothes and hold open the eyes. I guess I should change the slide for you. Emergency showers shall be designed, manufactured, and installed in such a manner that once activated, they can be used without requiring the use of the operator's hands. So visually in this video, you can see the gentleman activated the shower, the eye wash, and then the shower, and those units are staying on at the proper flow for a full 15 minutes. So he's able to hold open his eyes and remove his contaminated clothing. There is older equipment out there in the industry that has spring-loaded valves that allows the unit to be shut off. So with this revision, you're going to need to make sure that all of your existing equipment is up to date and will stay on without the use of the operator's hands. The next revision was regarding installation of eye washes and eye face wash equipment. So the equipment needs to be arranged such that the flushing fluid flow pattern is not less than 83 centimeters or 33 inches and no greater than 143 centimeters or 53 inches. In the previous revision, 2009, it was 45 inches. So what we're now measuring is from the surface floor of the user to the stream height versus in the past, we were measuring from the surface floor of the user to the top of the eye wash head. With this change, we're now ensuring that the eye wash streams are in the appropriate spot and not exceeding the pressure and the flow patterns. On your screen, you can see a couple images. The top one is showing where to place the eye wash gauges in the eye wash streams. At any instance at 8 inches or less, those eye streams need to hit the eye circles. If they are not, we are not in compliance. That is a big part of the annual testing, and as OSHA comes by and does an audit, they will absolutely check for that. You need to visualize some of the, you may see out in the industry, and we have definitely seen it, too much flow. I do understand that the ANSI standard has minimums, but some of these pieces of equipment are installed improperly, and it almost looks like eyeball pressure washers, and that's not something I'm going to want to stick my eyes in and not something you're going to want to stick your eyes in. So again, take into consideration the user themselves and try to make it the most comfortable experience as possible. The two bottom images are the same types of equipment They're both eye washes, and they both meet the standard for the 53-inch maximum, but we need to account for victim comfort. The one on the left has a flow control within the head. It does meet the 33 to the 53-inch requirement, and it has a zero vertical velocity, which we'll get into a little later. It's pretty much a puddling effect when the water reaches the highest point, and it makes it really comfortable for the user. The unit on the left is a little closer to what I was calling an eye pressure washer, and definitely not something I think I would like to stick my face in for a full 15 minutes. The eyes are sensitive, so soft flow needs to be provided. One of the last changes in the 2014 revision that's actually pretty important to take into consideration, we added some verbiage around a step up. So this is in the appendix, and it's an installation consideration. And what it says is a single step up into an enclosure where the equipment can be accessed is not considered an obstruction. In the past, it was. So as you can see in this picture, this is a enclosure where the unit is, the eye wash and the shower can be accessed inside of the unit, and it does require a step up. This may not be the best picture. It almost looks like there's two, but just take it with a grain of salt. You would open the door and access the unit, and it does require one step. That is now allowed. What's not allowed is someone taking a step up and still having to travel to the equipment. The step is allowed when entering the physical piece of equipment. Let's get into a couple recommended best practices based on what we see when we're out in the facilities, those who may be going above and beyond. So you're going to need to evaluate the equipment functionality and locations. ANSI states that all units must be free of obstruction, but there are other factors to consider. For example, as Brian was touching on, typically in the event of an incident, there should be a responder guiding and walking along or running along with the victim to make sure that their clothing is removed, they access the appropriate piece of equipment. There should be no obstructions, but if there unfortunately is, that responder can assist in getting that out of the way and ensuring that the victim makes it to the piece of equipment. So it needs to be located in an area with enough space for the emergency responder to fulfill their activities. Again, this is not in the standard, but definitely important to take into consideration. You don't want a piece of equipment on the left and on the right side of the unit where there's no room for the responder to assist. Then you'll want to monitor and evaluate all accessible components of your facility's equipment on a frequent and basis routine to manage potential problems. We know that facilities and different facilities are changing at all times, and so barriers can be put in the way, obstacles and obstructions can be placed in the wrong location. So if you're able to check that on the weekly test, that's a big piece. Just ensure that that piece of equipment is accessible. Let's get into a little bit of the color coding. So ANSI Z358.1, which is a different section of the standard, is the hazard color coding. We know it's typically a part of the standard safety training, and we see that people are aware that red equals danger or stop, yellow equals caution, orange equals warning, and green is identified as safety equipment and location of the safety equipment. You may see other manufacturers out there that have emergency eye washes and showers in these all ranges of these colors. Haws has all green equipment to follow along with this hazard color coding, really just making sure that all the employees are aware of where the safety equipment is located. Another best practice, you want to determine the most suitable product for the application. So earlier we went through the difference between an eye wash, an eye face wash, a drench shower, and a combination unit, and then we touched a little bit on the enclosures, which is any of those inside of an enclosure to keep it protected from outdoor extreme temperatures, whether really hot or really cold. So when you're specifying an eye wash in a chemical plant, that may not be the best solution. Because it is highly unlikely that that chemical is only going to splash on the victim's eyes, it's most likely going to hit the eyes and the face and potentially the body. So you're going to need facial coverage and or body coverage. So in this instance, we would recommend either an eye face wash or a combination unit as the appropriate choice. all Hawes units, on a side note, are eye face washes. They are the better choice, and they provide a more full coverage, branch coverage. We do have another webinar. It's approximately the same amount of time. It is on our YouTube channel, so you can just type in Hawes Corporation, go to our playlist, go under ANSI, and we've got a webinar that goes through in much more detail all the types of equipment, including personal squeeze bottles, portables, gravity fed, all the way from the smallest to the largest applications, and when they would be used, when you would need to be specifying that product versus another. So that's a really helpful webinar.
Samantha, also just to clarify, we do have some of our portable units which are eyewash only, but that's going to be more for a dusty or dusty environment, or more for particulates in the eye.
Yes, yeah, we do. You, as we mentioned earlier, you want to take tepid water a step further. Providing 60 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit is going to meet the bare minimum, which we would like to say is the ANSI standard. That is the bare minimum, but going above and beyond is going to ensure that there could be less time spent in the hospital, less lost money, and potentially lower injury. So your average water temperature in your residential shower is around 105 degrees, and comfortable room temperatures are between 68 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So recommending installing that equipment and ensuring that the equipment is delivering 80 to 85 degree Fahrenheit water temperature is going to be comfortable, and that's going to ensure and hope that the victim will be able to stay in that piece of equipment for the full 15 minutes. Imagine yourself, 15 minutes is an extremely long period of time, especially if that incident might have been extremely severe. You're holding your eyes open with running water in them. You have a 20-gallon per minute shower cleaning off those contaminants. We need this to be as comfortable as possible for that victim. And lastly, you want to ensure that you're doing the proper weekly activation. It is stated in the standard, and there are really only 2 requirements during the weekly activation, and that is to flush the heads of the equipment, so the shower head and the eye face wash and or eye wash head, long enough to ensure, or you would flush it to ensure that water is getting to both of the heads, and then number 2 would be flushing it for a duration long enough to clear the dead leg, and the dead leg is any stagnant water that's been sitting in the piping. Length would be determined on how long your piping may be. So if you've got an extremely long loop, flush that long enough to make sure all of that water that could be sitting in the piping and exposed to hot temperatures is all cleared out, and any sediment buildup that we don't want getting into the face, eyes, or body is cleared out. So we do have a complimentary ANSI checklist. It's on the annual inspection, but the weekly requirements are also indicated on that checklist, requirements along with the Hawes best practices. I'm going to make sure to send this out to you as well in the follow-up email, so no need to go to this link, but if you'd like it right now, right here, go for it. You can visit our hawesco.com website, click on the support tab. On the left side, we have an ANSI resources page that has a lot more than just the checklist, but that's where you can access the checklist. Let's discuss the differences between the Hawes Axion Eye Face Wash units and some of the other units. Specifically, we came out with what we're calling Axion MSR, Medically Superior Response Technology. And what we did was we changed the direction of the flow. So we're flushing from the inside out versus traditional eye washes that flush from the outside in. So traditional eye washes will take the water as well as the contaminants and start from the outer corner of your eye and flush inward. What that's doing is potentially causing and allowing those contaminants and the water to flush into your system via the lacrimal punctum, which is your tear ducts. That could then be inhaled into your lungs, since that system is all connected. That's the last thing we want to do. You already have chemicals in your eyes. Why are we wanting to push it into the system? Yes, Hawes, we were doing it wrong in the past until we came out with Axion technology after we talked to ophthalmologists and doctors, and they said, oh yeah, you know, all you manufacturers are doing it wrong. When we have somebody come into the hospital, we're tilting their head and we're flushing from the inside out, starting at the inner corner and flushing outwards, hopefully capturing all those contaminants and flushing it out of the eye and down the face, and then rinsing the face. So what AXIA and MSR does is it reduces injury. So with those inverted water streams, it's just gently flushing the contaminants away from the susceptible glands, taking into consideration victim comfort. I know I beat that one, but it is important. So the laminar flow water streams we talked about earlier, that puddling effect on the top, that's what we like to call zero vertical velocity. So right at the top of what you can see in the image on the left, if you were to put your hands in that, extremely gentle flow, puddling effect, very comfortable on the eyes. We also have flow control within the unit, within the head of our unit. So if there is excessive pressure from the back end, that flow control in the head of the unit is not going to allow the AXIA eye face wash to become an eye pressure washer. Clean flushing fluid within the unit, there's an inline strainer. It's going to collect the debris to help guarantee that the flushing fluid is not further aggravating the injury. A part of the weekly inspection is also to clean that out. So you've got double protection, cleaning it out on a weekly basis, and we've got an inline strainer. And of course, similar to all Haas equipment that goes out our doors, we meet ANSI Z358.1 compliance. We meet that standard and we exceed that standard as well. So in 2014, we reached out to practicing ophthalmologists and got a little information on what they thought with the inverted axion flow versus the traditional heads that you may see with majority of other manufacturers. And we found that there's a 43% increased reduction of contaminants when you're using inverted flow. They're telling us the most important features are obviously ANSI compliance, but on the other end of the spectrum, comfort of the victim. Flushing from inside to out is preferred 4-to-1, and 86% of those ophthalmologists say that comfortable water pressure is very important. With that, let's step into poll number 3. We aren't done yet, so don't go anywhere, but after listening to the guts of this webinar, what are you guys likely to do next? If you could check all that apply, that would be great. We'd like to know if you're going to now do a full test using the ANSI checklist that we'll provide. Are you going to contact us for more info on ANSI or potentially Axion? Or would you like to learn more about Axion technology and how you can retrofit your units? I don't want to get too salesy here, but we do have a retrofit kit, very convenient. It's a simple twist on, twist off of either the shower head or the eye wash head to axionize, if you will, your equipment. Ensure you're flushing in the proper direction. You now have flow control if you did have flow issues, and it's a simple, cheap solution versus ripping that piece of equipment out, purchasing another expensive piece of equipment and reinstalling it. So, all right, great. Thanks everybody for participating. We'll move on here. And I think I'm going to hand this one off to Brian.
Yes, as a no-charge service, Haas does offer a free survey program. We will send our sales associates out for a one-day full of inspections. What we find in the field when we've facilitated these is that 78% of the products out in the field actually are not compliant, and that's from a performance standpoint. So that could be too much flow, lack of flow, as Sam mentioned earlier, tepid water. It could be below that 60 degrees. About 10% that we see out there are non-compliant, not a performance issue. So it could be signage, missing signage, and things along those lines. And only 12% of the units that we actually see out in the field are compliant. So I mean, that's a overwhelming stat right there. I mean, that would basically be like pulling into an emergency room and saying 12% of the folks that come in here walk out the door. I don't think we would pick that hospital if only 3 out of 4 were not going to make it out. Please, if you are interested in this service, contact us to see if you qualify. You can either contact your salesperson or visit haasco.com//survey.
We're actually just going to launch the next poll to make it a little easier on you guys. You can just either hit yes or no on this poll if you do want to be contacted and connected with the appropriate rep for the survey program. We'll give it a couple seconds, let everybody answer, and then I'll give it back to Brian to talk about another opportunity in service. All right, thanks everybody. Back to you, Brian.
Okay, we do also work with a third-party provider called Zavato. Are you on that slide, Sam?
No, but I am now. Oh, sorry.
Perfect. So Zavato is an independent third-party service provider that can go from startup commissioning to the annual ANSI inspections. They also do offer an online competent person training certification, which is very valuable. That's $50 for the organization, regardless of how many associates are trained. They can also work on the alarms, installations there, repairs and upgrades, and it's not a Haas service, so they are able to take a look at any manufacturer you have there on site. They also will provide an annual warranty service, and they will do preventative maintenance as well as annual contracts. And back to the testing and working the trade shows that we've been to, there is a real misconception around the weekly inspection. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been at a show and I've talked to somebody about this and they said, oh, no, don't worry about it. I get it done on a monthly basis. So, I mean, it really has to be done on that weekly basis to meet the standard and avoid those OSHA fines. And they can be reached at Zavato, at our www.zavato.com.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Brian. All right, it's time to move into some questions and answers from all of you in the audience, but first, let's do a couple FAQs. I tend to get these questions a lot, so I want to get them answered. Hopefully that'll cover some of your questions, and then we'll move on and hopefully be able to save you a couple minutes to get you to your next meeting today. So, do the OSHA fine increases apply in Canada? That's that 80% increase that went into effect August 1st of this last year. So Canada doesn't follow OSHA, but they do follow CCOHS, which is the Canadian Centre of Occupational Health and Safety. They have 10 provincial and 3 territorial areas, each having their own legislation. And those outline the general rights and responsibilities of the employer, the supervisors, and the workers. So I haven't seen anything about an increase in fines, but I suspect that it won't be far away. What is the required weekly test versus the annual test? We touched on that. In the standard, it is bare minimum. The weekly test only requires you ensuring that water hits the heads of both the units, that's the shower, or both the heads, which is the shower and the eye face wash and or eye wash. And then ensuring that you clear the dead leg, however long that duration may require. The annual test is everything else we went through. All of that needs to be checked on an annual basis. If there's any other questions with that, feel free to reach out to us. And again, we have Zavato and then the the training program, the on-site inspection program that can help you with that if you're still in question. With the most recent ANSI update, our existing eye face washes, showers, and drench hoses required to meet the new guidelines. There is no grandfather clause in the standard. So as the standard changes and improves, existing installed equipment must follow those changes. No exceptions there. And does a door constitute an obstruction? We touched on that a little bit, but from the standard, the following verbiage is provided, and I've got it right here with me. A door is considered to be an obstruction where the hazard is not corrosive. One intervening door can be present so long as it opens in the same direction of travel as the person attempting to reach the equipment. And the door needs to be equipped with a closing mechanism that cannot be locked to impede access to the equipment. So in the 2014 revision, Appendix B states that a single step up into an enclosure where the equipment can be accessed is not considered an obstruction. So key takeaways there: ensure the doors are opens within the path of travel to the unit. Not sure if you've seen any Haas integrated, which is our systems side of the business. All of the doors are saloon-like, so you will push both the doors forward, and then to exit you can also push them forward. We can't have handles, and we can't have anything that has the opportunity of locking. That will not meet the standard. But you now can have a single step up into the enclosure. All right, I'm moving to the contact us slide just so you guys can write that down, but I'm going to quickly glance over and see what we have for some Q&A from you guys. All right, let's see. Are Axion eyewash upgrades available for other brands and old Haas stations? Yes, the answer is yes. We call these our Axion Advantage kits. They're upgrade kits. They come with a couple different connectors or adapters, and they'll retrofit the eyewash head over to the Axion face wash head. We also have kits for the shower head as well. and that's for a majority of competitors in the space. So if you wanted to search those on our website, those are AX13, AX13S, and AX14. So sounds like Brian wants to touch on that one.
Well, no, we do have a, on the website as well, I believe there is the document that shows what kits they're, or which existing units they're compatible with as well.
Yeah, so if you hit our resources page and go to product literature, if you find the AXIA and Advantage brochure, like Brian said, there's an extremely helpful document within that brochure that'll list out every single model number of all the competitors that can be retrofitted. So you're not purchasing an upgrade kit and then it ends up not working. But we've seen that 80 to 90% of existing competitors and old Hawes units can be retrofitted. When speccing multiple showers in a series piping connection, does the standard require all, some, or just one of the showers to run at a full flow for 15 minutes? So that one's tough to answer. If you expect all of those units to need to be used at the same time, then yes. So if your safety department or your health and safety manager says that only 2 units would potentially be needing to be used at the same time, then your supply feed needs to be able to handle 2 at a time and ensure simultaneous flow for both units activated at the same time. I hope that answers that one. Which type of emergency showers and eye wash is required for a forklift battery changing and charging area? So I recommend that you need to assess the dangers to determine if more of the face would get hit with battery acid. Our experience of looking at these installations say that a combination safety shower and eye face wash unit is needed, so that full coverage. Again, it's really assessing what parts of the bodies could be, of the body, face, and eyes can be affected. If it's only the eyes, you need an eye face wash. If it's only eyes and face and not the body, an eye face wash will work. If there's the potential of the body getting hit at all with any of the chemicals, a combination unit is required. Specific for that, Hawes model 8300, 8309 is a great all-purpose indoor shower. All right, let's see. So we do not have drains near our equipment, but we are required to do the weekly and annual testing. Does ANSI provide information on drains? So we hit on that a little bit. Drainage is not a part of the standard and the plumbing codes don't require one. However, you should look at the area to ensure that if it's wet, you could still get to the shower without risking furthering that injury. So I agree, it doesn't really make sense. We'd like it to be in the standard, and that weekly and annual testing could potentially cause a big mess and water damage, so we recommend you look into a drainage system. All right, Joseph, during a weekly test, do you have to test both the shower and the eye face wash, or will just the eye face wash work? No, you'll need to test both, and this falls in line with the simultaneous use requirement. So as a general statement, all equipment needs to be inspected weekly to ensure that there is flushing fluid supply and that the equipment is in good repair. If the equipment is plumbed, then it needs to be activated weekly to clear the supply line, and the weekly inspection also looks at the location. The best practices on the weekly inspection looks at the location to ensure that the equipment hits all those requirements we talked about earlier, such as well lit, identified with highly visible signage, free of obstruction, and on the same level as the hazard. Those are all really easy parts of the standard to ensure, just making, visually, that's a visual check, so that should absolutely be a part of the weekly test. For portable or gravity-fed eye wash stations, what's the standard for draining and refilling the tank, along with the additive? So there's a couple different designs on the market, and I can't provide a specific standard you should follow, but ANSI requires that any portable or self-contained eye wash should be visually inspected weekly to ensure that flushing fluid is present and to see if it needs to be exchanged or supplemented. Per the manufacturer's specific model instructions, the unit needs to be maintained per those instructions. For Hawes and most other manufacturing units, you use potable water in a sterile bacteriostatic additive every 3 months. That's when the additive tends to go bad or needs to be exchanged. During that, you'll want to rinse the unit as well between the exchanges. If you're not using an additive and you have something such as a cartridge-like portable unit, then you just need to stick with what the manufacturer's specific model instructions. And then if you're using potable water, but you're not using an additive, then you're going to need to change that out on a minimum on a weekly basis. All right, what time are we at? A couple more questions. Is tepid water supply required for interior applications? If the water supply to the equipment gets below 60 degrees or above the 100 degrees, which is the temperature range for tepid water according to the standard, then yes, the water needs to be tempered. Indoor, outdoor, either way, it's about the water, the delivered flushing fluid temperature. We have a potable face wash station in an outside chemical storage shed that freezes in the wintertime. What do you recommend? Last year, Haws launched our model 7501T, and this is a 9-gallon gravity-fed tempered portable eye wash. And this unit uses a heated insulated blanket, and that provides ANSI-compliant tempered water in outdoor temperatures down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So if your outdoor temperature is going to reach that negative 30 degrees, the unit will ensure that the 60-degree range of the water will be maintained. On the high end, the blanket will protect, it's more of an insulator on the high end of the tempered water. So up to 100 degrees outdoor ambient temperature, it will maintain the 100-degree internal water temperature, non-indirect sunlight. Yeah, so I would take a look at the model 7501T. Okay, so there's tons of questions coming in. I'm struggling a little to get them all in order, but like I said, we'll make sure that any questions that weren't answered just now will be answered. I'm going to send you guys the follow-up email later today. It'll have a link to the on-demand recording of today's webinar, and it'll also have a link to the OSHA fines white paper, the ANSI checklist, and the other resources that were mentioned. And then within the next week, you'll get a second follow-up, so keep an eye out for that. And that'll contain all of the Q&A. And then also a survey on the presentation, how that went. If you guys wanted to participate, we will be giving out a $5 Starbucks card. So we hope you can participate in that. Brian, was there anything you wanted to add before we close?
No, I just want to thank everybody for their attendance.
Yes, very much appreciated. We hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe, be safe, practice safe things, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone.